Okay, so what is your name?
Investigator Chris Tunney.
Okay, and what is your position and experience?
So I've been a police officer for about 15 and a half years. I started out in patrol. After patrol, I went and worked for the community policing unit. I worked there for several years. And then from there, I went into school resource officer. I worked at East High and at West High for both of those. After I left there, I went back to patrol for a little bit. And then I finished up my master's degree, and I got the job back in investigations up here at the King County Child Advocacy Center.
Okay. Do you believe taking a community-based response towards child abuse and neglect has a more effective impact compared to a traditional response?
So when I read this question, I was thinking about the things that you said, and honestly, so when officers go out, when I was in patrol and I went out to investigate this, we don't really have the option to bring social services in. Like if I'm dealing with a case where a kid says that they've been abused, my job as the officer is to not talk to the kid, only talk to a parent. You have to be a certified juvenile officer to talk to juvenile victims, to do a child forensic interview. There's a lot of certification that goes into that. I have that now.
Okay.
But back then, so we don't really have the opportunities to bring social services out. We can connect the families with social services after, and that's a great help. We've used that here on several occasions where, let's say, I had one case where two kids came in and they weren't ready to disclose. Now, we knew something had happened because of the things that they had told their mom, but they weren't ready to talk to us yet.
Okay.
So we got counselors involved, and we put the kids into therapy, and it took them about a year and a half, but it was about a year and a half later when they were finally able to start disclosing the things that had happened to them.
Okay.
So it's absolutely a great thing, but when you're responding just as a patrol officer, we really don't have those options.
Okay, so if, you were a patrol officer in a community where, if it were kind of like a smaller town, they don't have these kind of resources,
Right.
what would...
Well, we all have access to those resources, but, so when I think by community-based outside resources, you're talking about, DCFS, Mutual Ground. We can refer them. Like, when we go on a scene, anytime there's any type of abuse, whether it's a domestic abuse, child sex abuse, we call DCFS.
Okay.
They don't respond while we're there.
Yeah.
They're going to come in and step in after the initial report is done. So they are getting involved in the case, but it's not
direct
it's not
joint communication. It's just kind of handed off.
It's not the night that initially happened.
Okay.
Unless we're taking PC of a kid, which unless we're taking protective custody, DCFS doesn't show up while we're there.
Okay.
If we take protective custody, then DCFS will come out, and then they have to get involved in that. But that normally doesn't happen.
Okay. So when it comes to policing and child abuse and neglect, police agencies have shifted away from dealing with it in isolation and have focused on involving social work agencies / specialists from the beginning to find better solutions and better assistance to children and families. Why is it important to include social agencies from the beginning as opposed to letting officers / the police departments handle it solely? And what kind of issues can a specialist from a social agency prevent in the long run?
So having them involved is great because DCFS can offer family intact services. They can offer the family different things. Like us as a CAC, as a Child Advocacy Center, when we get the kids up here, if there's been an allegation, we get the kids a medical exam.
Okay.
We hook the kids up with therapists that are specific to child sex abuse.
Okay.
So that's where it's very helpful when we have that. There are times that I've found that when you're in patrol and some of these agencies do show up, they're a hindrance. Okay, like if there's a report of a sexual assault and let's say Mutual Ground sends somebody up to the hospital, they're too focused on victims' rights than to understand that there's a bigger picture here.
Okay.
When I have a 13-year-old girl who's pregnant by mom's mom's boyfriend,
a little bit more complex,
35, and we need to do a sex assault kit, I don't need somebody telling this 13-year-old, you don't have to do it if you don't want to.
Yeah.
Because the thing is my job as a CAC worker is to be there for the victim. We're victim sensitive. This is what we do. But if I have I've had 13-year-old girls who are pregnant by 25-year-old guys, and it's a consensual or a compliant relationship because you can't consent that young. they don't want to submit to a sex assault kit because then the person they love is going to be arrested.
Yeah.
But it's not okay.
No.
So there are a lot of times that, and we work very well with Mutual Ground. They're wonderful people. Michelle Myers, who runs Mutual Ground, is amazing. She helps us every way she can. But some of the workers there, I believe that they take their job as an advocate for that kid a little too far.
Okay.
Because we have to, as police investigators, as working here at the CAC, we have to look at the big picture. And that is, there is a criminal aspect to this.
Okay. All right. And then how has including social work agencies in the process had an impact on police agencies' workload?
So that's kind of like what we just talked about. There's good points and bad points. I think it's, for the overall, it's helped a great deal because these kids need outside resources. When we're in patrol or we're working the street, we run from house to house to house putting a Band-Aid on a problem, and then we move on to the next call. That's what we do. That's our job. So these people need long-term help. That's where DCFS comes in, Mutual Ground comes in. Mutual Ground is a great place for women who have been battered. They have the resources to help them to get through the counseling, to learn to get stronger, has a place for them to stay. So it really is, it's great when they can step in and help our victims with the long-term really effects of the abuse that they were subjected to.
Okay. And then my last question would be, how have police benefited working with social agencies and specialists? For example, has their training on these situations helped understand how to deal with these kind of issues on future calls?
So one, officers who respond to the call of child abuse I think the majority of them, the ones that I've talked to, I don't really talk to a lot of guys outside the department. Some of them, because I handle sex abuse in all of Kane County. Nobody wants to do these cases. Nobody wants to deal with this. So I think a lot of officers would welcome the help from an outside agency, because talking to a kid about being abused is a very difficult subject. And then on top of it, the rules that go along with the way you're allowed to talk to them, the questions you can ask and can't ask. If you don't know them, you ask the wrong questions or you start doing the wrong things. When it comes down to going to court, we lose, because you can't lead a child, when you're talking to them. And then I said that unfortunately, we don't have, just kind of what we talked about before, we don't have the ability to have them out right on the scene when it's happening, because DCFS has a response time. Mutual Ground is great, but they're not coming out to somebody's house at 3 o'clock in the morning when a child's disclosed abuse.
Yeah.
So they're awesome to have. They're great follow-ups. I just don't think we have the resources. We don't have the immediate resource. We have them for the follow-up, but we don't really have them for the immediate. So I think it would be better if we did, because we work so well with these agencies. But for what we do use them for, they really are great at helping us deal with the families and getting the family the help that they need.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add just about?
Nope.
All right. Well, thank you for this.
You're welcome.